Hi, this is Brent Skousen, the youngest son of W. Cleon Skousen. What you are about to hear is a live recording of a university lecture by W. Cleon Skousen as he taught his Old Testament course. We really are fortunate to have these recordings, although at the time they weren't anticipated to be released publicly. As these lectures were recorded live, they are unscripted and unedited. You will feel as though you are actually there. If you are following the Come Follow Me curriculum from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have tried to coordinate each lecture with this week's lesson, although there may be some overlap. For those interested in the text Brother Skousen and the students are using, it is published as The Third Thousand Years, written by W. Cleon Skousen, and it is available at bookstores or online at skousen2000.com. And if you prefer listening to the text, there is a new audio version just published this year which you can download from Amazon, iTunes, or audible.com. Now sit back and join us in the classroom of W. Cleon Skousen. Enjoy!
Now, I just want to mention the two main reasons why you go to college. There are at least two. Besides finding the right companion, there are two. The first one is so that it will be more difficult to deceive you. That's really why we have the university, so that you can find out what is good and what is true, and what is evil and false. And we're trying to help the student distinguish between good and evil. Now, I've mentioned to you before, I think, that I couldn't convince you that 2 plus 2 is 7. I might be able to temporarily deceive many of you into thinking that 49 times 49 is 3,581. If I talk real fast and put it in there, you see, until you figured it out. You really wouldn't know. Now, at the moment that you depend upon somebody else to tell you what is the truth, to that extent, we play the role of the sheep, don't we? Now, a sheep is a very sweet, lovely, loving, wonderful comfort to man. But they are very easily deceived. And so the next purpose of our coming to college is to be shepherds instead of sheep. Now, some of the time you have to be followers or sheep. But to learn, to teach you how to think for yourself, how to get the facts for yourself, how to come to your own conclusion, a humble one, of course, subject to more revelation, knowledge, and guidance, but nevertheless, how to think for yourself and how to get the facts for yourself. That's an important part of coming to college. Now, we do pretty well in science. We get pretty independent in science. It's in the humanities where we stumble all over ourselves. And it's almost as though the math student had to go back to Pythagoras and start all over again to be absolutely sure Pythagoras was right when he went down to Heliopolis and got the word from the Egyptians and so forth and developed some of his contributions in math. We don't. We've learned those lessons. We have confidence in them when we go on. Not in the humanities. Therefore, we repeat almost every second generation, at least, and sometimes every generation, the same errors, because we do not get to the position of knowing enough to guide ourselves. And we depend upon whims, astrology, Uncle Joe, Aunt Jane, or somebody with an opinion. We don't know for ourselves. In the area of political issues, we, as a people, not just Latter-day Saints, but the whole country, we're extremely uninformed and too busy to find out. So that's got to change. We definitely have got to change that. Your welfare is at stake, and so are your future children. So I've been waiting for many, many years for somebody to do something that all of us knew somebody ought to do. And as I've told you a couple of weeks ago, we're now trying to make a little contribution in that field, which we hope will be helpful. And that's to tell both sides of the issues as best we can, and then let the person choose. Now, today I have a copy of a report which is the only public copy of the Democratic National Platform available in print anywhere in the United States. They told us in Washington. And they gave us permission to print it. So this is what the Democratic Platform turned out to be. Now, they decided not to print their platform because they didn't think people read them, and it was a big waste of money. But you really do need to know what they stand for. And so this entire issue of the Freeman Report is the Democrat story the way they want it told. It's It's the story of Senator McGovern, the way he wants it presented. It's his story of his life. How much education did Senator McGovern get? Any of you know? PhD in what field? History, political science. Anybody know what state he represents? See, that's right, South Dakota. Anybody know what he was before he was a senator? Before that, in the beginning, he was an educator teaching at college. But did he have any other political experience? Was he a governor? Ever been in the state legislature? What was he? Well, before he was a senator, I mean. He was a congressman. Then he was an assistant to the president. And he was in charge of the program economic. It's distribution for the poor. What do they call it? Had a title. So that's basically his background. All right. So what we did was to take his story, and I wrote that part myself, so that it's all exclusively out of his writings. I mean, all these facts are his. And he says, I am for a one-world government. Now, that's not, some people will disagree with that, but that's something he's proud of. He wants everybody to know that he stands for moving us over into one-world society. And that's his whole history. And then the story of when he went to the convention is really something. The Democratic National Convention was a hot battleground. And he had always believed that if a candidate ran in the primaries, he should be able to go to the convention with whatever proportion of the delegates he was able to get. And it was called proportional representation. Now, the old rule was winner take all. In other words, if you got 28% of the vote in California in the primaries, and the other was among the others, kind of scattered out among the others, you'd be able to take the whole delegation because you were the number one. Your 28% was winner. So you get all the delegates from California. And he said that isn't right. But when he got back to the convention, he found that would steal the nomination from him, that very principle would prevent him from being nominated. And he said, I won the primaries, and I'm not going to have this stolen from me. I'm going to go back to the old rule, winner take all. And he took it into the courts, and he won. Went clear to the Supreme Court. It was a real battleground. That's that story. It's real interesting. And the old-timers in the party felt that the party was being stolen from them. So that's their story over on this page. These are the dissidents, the Democratic dissidents that felt like they were shoved aside and they weren't given adequate consideration. But there is the whole Democratic platform. We were given permission to print it. It's the only one available to the public as far as we know in the United States. See, there it is, covers that. And some of the things that are there are tremendously interesting. You'll agree with some of it, others you may not agree with. Now, next week, the Republican platform, and we'll do the same thing. We will tell it the way the Republicans want to tell it, so that you're quoting them, not the Freeman Report. Let me just read you one little bit here. This is the way they begin their preamble. Skepticism and cynicism are widespread in America. The people are skeptical of platforms, filled with political platitudes, of promises made by opportunistic politicians. Now, our traditions, our history, our Constitution, our laws, all say that America belongs to the people. All the people. But the people no longer believe that. They feel that the government is run for the privileged few rather than for the many. And they are right. As Democrats, we know that we share our responsibility for the loss of confidence in government. And we want to do something about it. So here's our platform. This is what we would do if we won. So you go down, and I want you to read this like you read a sports page or the funny papers, whichever you enjoy reading at your leisure. You read every word. I watch people review political news. They'll say, domestic policy, taxation reform, wow, property tax, Social Security, labor, right of veterans, man, Vietnam, amnesty, wow, support Israel, two-way trade. Now I got the platform now. That's about the way they read it. They don't read anything about it. So read this like you read the sports page, where you get the runs, errors, and everything. Some people just amaze me what they know about sports. And if we knew that much about political issues, we'd really be great. Right, and also the Socialist Party. All four. And you'll be amazed at the Socialist Party. We asked them for their platform, and they said, well, the two major parties got our platform. So we went back to the 1932 socialist platform. We're going to print the whole 1932 socialist platform. You won't believe it. In fact, the headline reads, Socialist Platform 1932-USA 1972, question mark? You'll be amazed. They feel very satisfied and victorious. No, they have a party, but they didn't come out with a platform as such. They just had all their people operate pretty much in the other two parties. Anyway, we're going to give you everything they would give us. And it's kind of interesting. And we got all of Norman Thomas's big story and what he's been saying, what he said lately. Now, here's something you see I would be very much in favor of. Over here they say, we must return to Congress the meaningful decisions on peace and war. Now, that's where the Constitution put it. President shouldn't be able to commit troops abroad without having it discussed in Congress. I'm very much in favor of that. And down here they did an amazing thing. They said, we're against foundations, where the Fords and the Rockefellers and these people put their billions over in these foundations, tax exempt, and then distribute them and pay their people, their favorites, certain $50,000 a year, etc., and control the money and pay no taxes on it. We're against that. See, that's real interesting because that's a good principle. The interesting part about it is all those foundations used to be behind the Democrats. They're now behind the Republicans. So the Democrats say, let's do away with foundations. I thought that was interesting. Okay. Then they've got busing and labor, and they've got population control. They want to repeal right to work. They want to oppose compulsory arbitration in labor disputes. That's interesting. Anyway, you will now be able to quote the Democrats accurately. This is really what they believe. Now we put Governor Rampton's program that he and his party developed. That's the Utah platform. We got a whole page of that, so that you'll know that. Now, if any of your these cost 25 cents a piece, except to BYU students, they're free. I bought enough of them for you, so you can all have a copy. You're welcome to. So if some of my helpers want to help distribute them, I think I have enough for everybody. You know, there's a lot of satisfaction if you take the time to get this under your belt intellectually. There's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in being able to discuss it intelligently and authoritatively. And so that's what we've tried to put in your hands so that you know what you're talking about. You'll also notice that there was no attempt to editorialize, to comment, to analyze, to criticize. It's just the way they tell it. We'll do the same for the Republicans, the same for the American Party, and the same for the Socialists. The Socialists will be a little bit different because we will include, I think in that one, the betrayal of the Democratic Party to the Socialists by Al Smith. This is his famous 1936 speech in which he says to the Democrats, we don't any longer have our party. We are not any longer the party of the people. We have become the party of big government, and I was the one that put the man in as president that has achieved it. It's quite a speech. And it's a historical speech, so we include that one. Now, if you can tuck that away and don't lose it, just tuck it away. As I give these to you each week, you'll find that this accumulates into very valuable material, because by the end of the year, we will have dealt with 52 issues on both sides, and you notice everything is documented. In this case, this is the Democratic platform from the original copy, Xeroxed and sent to us from Washington with permission to print it, and we have it in our file. You'll appreciate, of course, this is an abstract. These are the first 2 or 3 paragraphs, usually, of each, or sometimes the first paragraph of each issue. Then there's a lot of justification and detailed material that's underneath it. Now, in your opening chapter of your text, there are 2 or 3 things that always appear on the examination, so I want you to be sure and make note of it, because in none of our books did I find anything that discussed in depth who are God's chosen people. And because this is a very confusing thing to many people who take great pride in their ancestry, we thought that we would delineate who God's chosen people really are. And one word describes the chosen people of God, regardless whether they're black, white, yellow, or pink. There is just one word that describes which ones are chosen of God. And what's that word? Yes, righteous obedience would be the 2 words, and obedience is sufficient. When I ask you, what's the difference between a chosen person of God and one that's not chosen? The word is whether or not he's obeying God. And if he's obeying God, he becomes chosen. If he's not obeying God, it won't matter what his ancestry was, no matter how illustrious his position. He can be the most accomplished pianist in the world, the most magnificent artist in the world, and if he is disobeying God's commandments, he is not chosen. Now, that's important for us to understand. Now, the Lord has a way of choosing people. He says he's no respecter of persons, and that anybody, he can be born of Japheth or of Ham, and be just as chosen as the prime heirs of the kingdom, which are of Shem, by being obedient. Now, we came out of heaven, the brethren tell us, already obeying God in certain levels of integrity. The top level is called the celestial. That's total obedience. Then there's another level that never fights God. They're kind of for him, but not all the way. A little bit for me, not all the way with God. That's sort of terrestrial. Then there are the people that they just kind of drag their feet. We got to do that. Well, if you insist, it's that kind of a spirit. That's celestial, way down. And on this earth, they actually rebel. They're extremely rebellious, and they are the most numerous of all of our Father's children. They tend not only to drag their feet, but to rebel. And it's possible for them to get clear up to the celestial glory if they'll exert the extra effort. And among the heathen nations, the Lord says, I put most of my terrestrial spirits and scattered enough of my celestial among them to kind of be a leaven to lift them, because I desire to lift all of my children as high as they're willing to go. And the 88th section says nobody will go higher than the degree of law that he's happy under. So you could be an heir to the celestial kingdom and end up in the terrestrial kingdom just because there were too many meetings. I mean, it was just too tough. That's too tight up there. I like it a little looser. Okay, that's terrestrial. Fine, that's where I'm headed. So that's the way we actually choose the level of law we live under. And so the terrestrial spirits as a body have some celestial among them. Therefore, when we go out and preach the gospel among those nations that are worshiping, well, they're called heathens. That really means that they do not worship God as such. Among them, we have our brothers and sisters. And when Brother Benson was asked to open up those missions, he told us in high priest meeting what he told the missionaries to do. In return, missionaries from Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and in this class? That's strange. Yeah, one or two. Okay, good. Brother Benson, you will know whether or not this was still in force when you were there. He said, I instructed the mission presidents to tell the missionaries to go out and work by the Spirit, bear their testimonies, emphasize bearing testimonies, and watch the people as you bear your testimony. And if the Spirit sparks, fine. If it doesn't, move right on till we find our brothers and sisters, and they in turn will help the others. But we're looking for our brothers and sisters first. And it's just grown like topsy over there. Just thrilling. Okay. Once you understand the Lord's problem of trying to lift his children, you begin to catch a sense of your own responsibility. If you've been born under the covenant or born where you could hear the gospel, you have a tremendous responsibility. The Lord is really depending upon you to be a soldier of God, described by Moses in the 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy, 8th verse, 7th and 8th verse, where he says, before the foundations of the world, he outlined the whole history of mankind in terms of how many of you he had available and where he could scatter you. He didn't have very many of you. So you're extremely precious. And don't let the Lord down. Don't become inactive. Don't get yourself involved in drugs or immorality or any of the things that will swing you off this very fast spinning program that's been established now in the latter days. Now there's a real interesting passage that anyone who is a Gentile or of the tribe of Ham, who is willing to be obedient and go forward in the program of the Lord, automatically, through that obedience, becomes known as the seed of whom? Abraham. To receive the blessings of Abraham doesn't change their lineal descent, but it does change their whole frame of reference. They are entitled to the blessings of Abraham. And because the seed of Ham had a little difficulty in the pre-existence described in the 13th chapter of Alma, 6th and 7th verses, as those whom God foreknew would not accept priesthood service, therefore it was postponed in this life so they could not receive it. But they can eventually receive it if they're obedient. So they get all the blessings of Abraham too. Now just stand with us. Now, I have 2 or 3 of the seed of Ham in some of my other classes, and they're just great Latter-day Saints. They know exactly what they got to do. They got to make up for lost time, and they're doing it. And I had one of them speak to my Old Testament class at the 2 o'clock Old Testament class, in which he appealed to the priesthood. He said, now, the women of the church and we who are of Ham, depending upon you, brethren, to be good leaders, to understand the doctrine, and to get right in there and make the church acceptable to the Lord, and to keep our temples holy, etc. Now, will you do a better job? It was great to hear him plead with the priesthood to be more valiant. We're depending on you, brethren. That's just great. All right. Characteristics of God's chosen people. And I'd kind of keep a few of those in mind. Now, there are a lot of people that like to study the gospel topically. You'll find that topics are very difficult to remember unless they're identified with a historical situation. And if I ask you, I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I've got about 15 or 16 characteristics of those people. And you'll be amazed how hard it will be for you in the examination to come up with 3 or 4 of them. You're going to really have to concentrate on that. If I put it in a storytelling situation, historical situation, you can remember it. And that's why the manuals that are set up in terms of subject matter are too abstract. I find the saints do not remember them very long. That's why I like to study everything in terms of the historical setting when it was revealed. For example, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. What was that with reference to? Christ and the adulteress. You see how that comes just like that, doesn't it? Or what did Christ say when he was writing in the sand? What did he write when the adulteress had been captive and they wanted to stone her, which was literally possible? What did he write? See, that comes to you immediately. Let him who's without sin cast the first stone. See how that will come to you? All right. May have been that. But he was down, he kneeled down, was writing in the dirt. And there's some questions whether he wrote it or said it. In any event, my point is that if you have that in its historical setting, it's easier to recall, isn't it? Okay, now that's going to be true of the whole gospel. So whenever they come along and structure the gospel into abstracts, I say to myself, it's very sophisticated, and somebody had a great time doing it. But as a learning and teaching device, it is very uneconomical. That's my experience. That's why in all my classes, no matter what the manual is, I put it back down out of the abstract and into the historical setting. In spite of that, I have abstracted this little bit for you to give you some of the 15 characteristics of the people chosen of God. And they typify the great pioneer spirit and the spirit of the prophet, spirit of sacrifice, strong self-discipline, hard, humble work, willingness to keep God's commandments without rebelling and bucking, a worldview of individuals, accepting and loving and appreciating people wherever they are in the earth. Sure, they speak a little differently, they dress a little differently, they have little quaint habits that are beautiful if you take them in their setting. Some of them are very solemn. Some of the tribes of the nations of the earth, very solemn, very serious, and others real happy-go-lucky, childlike giggling, so forth. Very easy for it because they're different to feel a prejudice against them. But the prophets of God love our Father's children wherever they are in their world setting. In our church, we never try to wipe out the basic culture of a people. We try to preserve that culture. We do not try to homogenize and make them all the same. And you go over to the Polynesian Islands or go to the Hawaiian Islands, where the church has set up something to preserve the culture of all the Polynesian peoples. And it's the #1 tourist attraction in Hawaii when you go, right? Okay? Then be willing to tear up roots and move, go wherever you have to, on a mission, wherever. And being a continuous study. Fight the boob tube. Fight it. It's the curse of this generation to draw you away from conscientious study of good books. We get out of school, and your mothers and fathers, you ask them how much reading they get to do. If they have the slightest moment for relaxation, click it on. What's going on? Oh, the game. Whoa, I hope he wins. And here, all of a sudden, we're deeply involved. Go, boy, go. Forget about how many debts we owe and what taxes are due, etc. Go, go, go. That boob tube is robbing this generation of its intellectual inheritance. Be a good student. At least 1 hour a day on the Scriptures. 1 hour a day, every day on the Scriptures. Okay. Now, fulfill the purposes of earth life. Raise as large a family of well-trained and well-loved children as health and circumstances will permit. You see, we believe in a planned family, planning to have as many as we can. And to prove worthy of continuous advancement in the priesthood, come right on up through the priesthood ranks. Don't get yourself swung off by being out of touch with the brethren. Keep coming up. To serve cheerfully in the Lord's kingdom, whatever the capacity. We have our stake president now teaching 8-year-olds. Just great. He's the best teacher those 8-year-olds ever had. They love him. He takes them on trips. He has them over to the house Sunday afternoon. Boy, he's a great teacher. They just love him. And that was the worst class in the whole Sunday school. The ex-stake president took it over. Serve willingly in public life when needed, including civil offices, elected posts, and the military. And teach, speak, travel, write, or serve in every possible way to promote righteousness in the earth, whether spiritual or secular. And be continually engaged in a good cause. Don't have to be commanded in all things, for he that is a slothful servant. To be a good provider. That's very basic. Some people want to be so righteous that they don't have any time to earn a living for their family. And Paul says even the heathens do better than that. Be a good provider, and stand up and be counted when the forces of evil sweep in to destroy God's kingdom or the rights and liberties of his children. This is what is typical of the great of the past, and we want to copy them to the best that we are able to. Now, I gave you the historical setting for the 3,000 years. You should know that all northern Africa that's now Sahara Desert, we're finding was once beautiful, wonderful, cultivated land. That buried beneath some of those sands are the ruins of cities that had populations of over 1 million. And they overgrazed the land and turned it into a desert. Rome was responsible for a lot of it, but in any event, it was a little different. Where Damascus now is, total desert. Used to be magnificent forests of huge trees all around there. And one conqueror after another would burn them down. Then they'd grow back again, burn them down. Next conqueror would come and burn them down. Then they'd grow them, burn them down. Finally, the erosion got started. Now only the desert. Across Asia, there were vast bodies of water, as Brother Nibley has pointed out. The Jaredites could have gone that way and built their barges just as well as they could have come across the Atlantic. And while the evidence does seem to appear that they crossed the Atlantic in 344 days, there were great bodies of water in the other direction, which there are not now. They're just prairies and the Gobi Desert and so forth. That all used to be huge inland bodies of water as though it had been left by a great flood. Now, the cultural setting for the 3,000 years I mentioned to you, we had the heights and the depths. We had some people so righteous they were to be able to be translated like the people of Melchizedek, 10 generations after Noah. We had others that were just as depraved as those that got themselves wiped off the face of the earth by the great flood, and all within the lifetime of Noah, who lived 350 years after the flood. Well, you need some kind of a goal. And to read one chapter of the Book of Mormon before you go to sleep isn't entirely wasted, but it's only about 10% efficient. So if you'll take a whole hour and say, this is my study hour, and get off by yourself, no TV, no radio, no telephone, no interruptions, you're just gone. And the mind is usually between 5 and 6, or 5:30 and 6:30, right in there. Boy, it's productive. It's so exciting you hardly wait till tomorrow morning. If you do it for 20 minutes, just not enough. You really need a chance to give the Spirit time to work on your mind. That's why I used an hour. Of course, if you aren't able to, well, that's something else. But then, of course, you do because that's part of your schoolwork. But it's after you get your little family coming along. That's when people begin to neglect studying. And our forefathers, you see, they get up at 4 o'clock, milk a bunch of cows, have a little bite of breakfast, go out and work until dark, come in, milk a bunch of cows. And they knew more about their scriptures than this generation does. That should tell us something. And they're going to be our judges, you see. You say, well, Jim, Grandpa, I didn't know that. You didn't know that, son? Well, no. Was that what you're supposed to do? You mean you haven't read Isaiah 48? I mean, what's in Isaiah 48, Grandpa? You don't know? That's going to be a real interesting dialogue. Okay. Now, there were 2 pre-flood men left when Abraham was born. They were still on the earth, at least 2 that we know of. Who were they? Noah and Shem. Did Noah outlive Abraham? No, he died when Abraham was 28. Did Shem outlive Abraham? Yes, completely. He lived 502 years after the flood. He lived out. Abraham outlived Abraham a considerable period of time. All right, now the Vestal Virgin prostitution is back. Human sacrifice is back on the earth. All the things that were such an abomination to the Lord. And so Abraham comes into the earth, has to get the priesthood from somebody other than his father. Got it from whom? Yes, you practically all got that one. He got it from Melchizedek, 84th section. You see, nobody knows that except those who have access to the restored scriptures. Not in the Bible. Everybody assumed that he was ordained by Melchizedek when he paid tithes to Melchizedek. And that's an assumption. It doesn't say he was ordained. But he was ordained by Melchizedek when he was just a boy before his marriage. His youth, I should say, prior to his marriage in any event. And then there was terrible famine. He almost got sacrificed by his own father and the priest of Egypt, Pharaoh. And then he escaped, went up to Haran. He left Haran at what age? 62. Finally made his way down to the promised land and went down into Egypt, came back out and arrived and established himself at what age in Canaan? At 75. What great event happened when he was 86? Ishmael was born. When was circumcision introduced? Immediately afterwards, wasn't it? In connection with the birth of Ishmael. Let's see. Excuse me. No, he was older. It was in connection with Ishmael, but the year before Isaac was born. 13 years, wouldn't it be? Well, it'll be 13, 89. Sarah was 89, let's see. And he was 99, 86, 99. Okay, and so was Abraham circumcised at this time? Yes. 99 years old, circumcised. So was everybody else. The Lord says, this is a covenant unto you forever. And was it a covenant to Abraham forever? But did it stop with what? Ministry of Christ, the coming of Christ. It was stopped. But nevertheless, it was an eternal covenant as far as Abraham and his descendants were concerned until the Lord stopped it. It was eternal. Now, Isaac was born when his father was how old? How old was his father when Isaac was born? 100. How old was his mother? That's pretty wonderful, you see. 90 years old. No wonder she laughed. And then when Sarah died, how old was Isaac? 37 years old. She died when she was 127. And so that means that Isaac was 37 because she was 90 when he was born. Okay? Everybody follow that? Okay, and then 3 years later, Father Abraham thought it was time to get him a wife. And he sent who did he send to get the wife for Isaac? His steward, his chief steward. And was his chief steward happy to go? He sure wasn't. Boy, that's a tough assignment to pick out a bride for your boss, and his son, rather. Did he go alone? 10 camels in the caravan, wasn't it? And when he got up there, one of the interesting things about his approach there, he knelt down and he said, Heavenly Father, this is too much. I've got this terrible assignment here. I got to pick out one of these girls, and I'm not going to know which one it is, so I just got to have your help. And so I'm going to give a real hard test. I'm going to ask drinks of these girls when they come along. And the one that says, I'll not only give you a drink, but I'll bail up all the water necessary for your 10 camels, which no girl in her right mind would do, of course. If you've ever bailed water for a camel and seen how much a camel can drink, you'd never volunteer for that assignment. And so he said, I'd like to make that the test if you don't mind. And the Lord didn't say he would or he wouldn't, but here came a very beautiful girl, and he comes and he says, please, a drink? Oh, she said yes, and I'll get drink for all your camels. Oh, have I got the right one? So he sits there and watches her. And she waters all those camels. Boy, and they're just off the desert. Man, they take a tank one at a time. And she finally gets them all watered. And then he kneels down on the ground. He goes over and first he puts the bracelets on her hand, puts the earrings on her, and he kneels down and says, Heavenly Father, thank you. Oh, my great master Abraham will be so happy that I've... And now the girl knows who he is. Oh, you're the servant of my uncle Abraham? Yes, yes. And then she runs home, tells her brother Laban all about it, and Oh, so Laban says, I got to go down to meet this man if it's Uncle Abraham's servant. So they invite him to come up, and they have provender for his camels and everything, and they ask him to eat. He won't eat until he's done what? I want to tell you what's happened. I was sent up here to get a wife for my master's son. And I told the Lord, I want you to select the woman, the one that bails out this water voluntarily. And your Rebekah did it. And now I want to know if you let me take her down to marry her cousin. And of course, Laban and his father, they said, well, I guess it's in the hands of the Lord. We really don't have anything to say about it. Very good, said the servant. All right, that's fine. Well, they said, you're not going to leave right away. We ought to stick around here a little while, have a little farewell. And I said, don't you think? And what did the steward say? Don't delay me. Everything's working good. Don't want any interruptions. I'm on my way. And so they appealed to Rebekah. And was she willing to go? Yes. And then they put her on this camel caravan, and that must have been a great satisfaction. As this master saw it, a beautiful girl he was bringing back for Isaac. Just beautiful, just beautiful. And I thought it was extremely interesting the way the Bible describes it. They're coming along through the fields, and when the servant left, they were living up here, and he parted from here. Now they're down here. And so as he comes pretty close to the wells, he sees a person coming, and he can just tell by the gait or some other way that it's Isaac. He says to Rebekah, my master's son, he's coming. Ooh, Rebekah says, stop the camel, stop the camel. Oh, she gets up, Well, I tell you, and it's kind of interesting that when they finally came, and Isaac and, what did you bring me? What is it going to be like now? And so the servant says, come over here, I want to tell you something. So he didn't introduce them immediately. He takes Isaac over by himself, and he says, I want to tell you about this girl. This is a very special girl. I didn't select her. You didn't? No, the Lord did. He did? Yeah, the Lord did. Is she all right? I think so. You'll see. Introduce her. Was it love at first sight? It was great. Now, the fantastic part about it all is that in spite of the great affection that they had, and she'll be so beautiful as time goes by, she'll be so beautiful and attractive as a relatively elderly woman, that Isaac will be worried about the same thing happening to him that happened to his father in Egypt, won't he? So she undoubtedly, these women of Shem, boy, they were beautiful girls. So wasn't it amazing that she had to wait how many years before she had any children? She had a child. 19 years she was barren. She asked her husband to please ask the Lord now if it wouldn't be all right. And the Lord said, all right. So she had her children when she'd been married how many years? 20 years, that's right. 9 months makes 20 years. Okay, and one other interesting thing about this, she asked the Lord for her children. She's blessed with them. And then a terrible thing's happened. What happens to her? Extremely ill. How can you be so sick with a baby that the Lord gave you? Every mother says this. I'm doing what the Lord told me. How can I be so sick? And we went through it 8 times, and each time, you wondered the same thing. Okay, this is what the Lord was talking about when he said to Eve, this is the way it has to be, and it isn't too pleasant. But anyway, don't blame me now. You asked for it. Okay. Now, when the Lord gave a revelation, who got it? Isaac? No, she was praying to the Lord, and she was told by the Lord through some instrumentality, angel or otherwise, that she didn't have a baby. She had 2 babies, and they were going to be the heads of 2 great kingdoms. And she was told which one would be the main heir. And which one was it? The younger one. And so when the older one was born, we got just 1 minute now. When the older one was born, he came forth, healthy, robust, rugged little fellow, bright red. He's fuzzy all over, and it's red. A little fuzzy body, and so they named him They named him Harry. And a little later on, when the little fuzz really got bright red, they named him what? They named him Edom, which is red, Harry the Red. So you'll never forget his name. Okay. Now, I want to go kind of fast today, see if I can catch up with you, because we had poor Rebekah now expecting babies, and I want to be sure we got that all taken care of and get Jacob out of all his problems, because he had plenty. So let me just go through that now, to kind of remind you of a few things that tend to get into the examination. I suppose that having had the rather exciting experience of being raised as a semi-heathen, which Rebekah was, and then having herself selected by the Lord himself to partake of the great blessings of Uncle Abraham through his son Isaac, and have all these marvelous experiences, and then not being able to have children through which these blessings come for over 19 years, was a real trial to Rebekah's faith. And then to have her husband intervene and pray that the Lord would bless her so she could have this special blessing, and then be so terribly ill when her children were or when she thought she was with child, to be followed by her first personal revelation, so far as we know, indicating that she was going to have 2 children, not 1, and that the second would be the heir. And you remember that when the first one was born, he was named Esau because he was so what? Hairy. And then after he got a little older, the hair kind of took on a little pigment, and so they called him what? Edom, which means red. So he was Harry the Red. And if you just think of it that way, you'll never forget what Esau and Edom stand for. And the second little fellow came along, and even during the birth process, he reached out and grabbed the ankle of little Harry, and they afterwards kind of thought that was a token and a sign. They gave him the name Jacob, which means what? The usurper or the supplanter, the grabber. And because the Arab peoples descended from the eldest, and they remind the Jews every so often that they descended from the second one, and they think maybe they did a little usurping down along the line. But that's another story. Anyway, that when you get over into Israel, in the Arab-Israel conflict right now, this story comes up every so often. They're through Ishmael and Esau, or Edom. Because as you remember in our story, Esau went over and married into the family of Ishmael. So you've got the Arabs coming down through these 2 people, through Ishmael and Esau, through both of them. All right, now something happened pretty exciting to these 2 boys when they were about 15. What was that? That was the death of their very famous grandfather, Abraham. And who was it that took care of Abraham's funeral? Ishmael and Isaac, both together. Now, the cave of Machpelah at Hebron is down from Jerusalem about 16 miles. I shouldn't say down, it's along the tops of the mountains. And that's a main Arab center at the moment. And when you go in to look down through a little hole where you can see the cave underneath the mosque, you have to go in at certain times because they have the funerals in this same mosque all the time, and the body of the dead is right out in the open. They don't have it in a casket or anything. They just carry it on a bier, and surrounded with flowers. And they'll bring them in, and you have to go in to see it in between the funeral services and other things that they're carrying on. And up in the mosque itself, they have these great, huge sarcophagi with the names of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so forth on them. But actually, there's nothing in them. They're about 14th century A.D. They're sort of memorial tombs. But the cave of Machpelah, the only big cave around there, as a matter of fact, so we're quite sure it is probably the right one, is down underneath the mosque, and they have you look down, and you can see a little lamp burning way down deep in the cave. And it probably was the one that once housed the bodies of all these very famous people. Because of the famine that struck the upper region in the mountain area where they were living, they were forced down onto the plain where the Philistines and the other Canaanites lived, And so they went to stay at Gerar, where there was a heathen king, and you have Isaac using the same excuse as did his father. His wife, Rebekah, is such a beautiful girl. Boy, these princesses of Shem, they were really beautiful women, even when they were quite elderly. And so he uses the sister bit. You know, she is my sister, brother and sister in the gospel. Anyway, his father used that down in Egypt. He didn't really have that good an excuse, did he, as his father did? But anyway, he used it. And then somebody was looking out the window and saw that Isaac and Rebekah were acting more like husband and wife than brother-sister, unless they'd been Greeks. And so it was suggested that they move away, and at least there was some hostility. And how many times did they finally move? They'd go out in the desert and dig a well, and then the Philistines would move in around and say, that's ours. And so they'd move on, and that's ours. And they'd move on. And they dug that third well, and finally they're so close to Abraham's old homestead, which had been abandoned, that they decided to go over there to what used to be called Beersheba. And so there they were when the king of Abimelech of Gerar came to see them with a couple of his people. And Isaac said, why do you come to see me? I thought you hated me. Oh, no, they said, no, it's all right. It's all right. You're very fine, prosperous people. We like to have you. Don't go too far away. Stay around. You'll find the heathens doing this every once in a while, the Hebrews. Stay around. It's good for business. And so we have this relationship, and it was kind of a relief to Isaac and his two sons, because they were prospering, and they did want to be friends if they could. And the men were out there digging like 60 in Abraham's old wells, see if they could get water out this far. And so they went ahead and had their little feast and made their covenants and called it again, what? Beersheba, and Sheba being what? Meaning well. And this is a covenant of the well. The oath by the well, or the well of the oath. And the king had barely departed back toward Gerar when his men came in and said, we struck. We got water. Oh, that's fine, Isaac said. This will be our homestead. This is where we will live. This is where we will stay. And so that was where they were, and had their establishment and their sheep and their farms and everything there. Which one was the farmer? Esau or Jacob? Esau. Which one was the shepherd? Jacob. And can you tell the difference? Yeah, one was red and one wasn't. Yeah. Yes, there's several ways that you can tell the difference, as we notice here a little later on. Now, when these two boys were 40 years of age, they'd become men, of course, by this time, and they weren't allowed to marry anybody in the vicinity. They were all heathens and forbidden under the covenant of the priesthood to be marriageable to them. Nevertheless, what happened to Esau? He married two of the Canaanite girls. Now, it was a source of great sorrow to the mother and father, but Esau didn't seem to take it seriously until many years later, quite a few years later. Now, how old is Isaac by this time? How old he was how old when the boys were born? He was 40 years when he married. He had to wait how long until he had children? So that makes him, see, he's getting up there, isn't he? 60. Okay, now the boys are 40 years old. Now what? So how old is he? 100, okay. Now, because of a subsequent deduction that we're able to make, figuratively speaking, mathematically speaking, we find that when he was about 117, he went blind, thought he was going to die. He's actually going to live for another 63 years, but he thinks he's about to die. You all remember this incident. Prior to this time that we'd had that situation arise, we don't know exactly the date or the period, but there had been an occasion when Esau had taken a solemn oath to sell his birthright for a bunch of pottage that had been cooked by the sheepherder brother of his. Sheepherders are usually good cooks. And so he had sold his birthright, but now that his father is old, he says he's going to give the birthright to Esau, who is the elder son and his favorite, in spite of the revelation to Mother Rebekah. And so he tells Esau to go out and get the venison and come in and make the stew that he so enjoys eating. And that's when Mother Rebekah overheard it and runs to Jacob, who's now 57 years of age. These two twins are now about 57, in that vicinity. And we're able to deduct that from the age of Jacob when Joseph was born. That's our next date. He's 91 when Joseph is born. We figure it all the way back to get down to 57 for Jacob when this incident happens. These are kind of things that you can figure out if you go into the scriptures in depth. So I'd kind of remember that 57 date because usually they think of Jacob as going up to get a wife when he was still a very young man. He was not. He was fairly mature, even for those ancient days when they lived to be 150 or 60 years old. And so Jacob doesn't want to do it. Why didn't he want to do it? His mother says, I want you to put on this lamb skin or goat skin. I want you to go in there and pretend that you are Esau. I want you to talk like him, pretend that you're him, and get that birthright blessing. It belongs to you. And Jacob said he didn't want to do it. Why? Yes, he said, my father will find I'm deceiving him. And then who took full responsibility for this little ploy? Yeah, she pulled rank on him. And she says, I command you to do it. So anyway, Jacob tries it. Gets it on his hands, on the back of his neck, and he goes in and makes that famous speech. Well, here it is. Who are you? Well, Esau, thy firstborn, and I've done according as thou badest me. Rise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said to his son, Now, how is it thou hast found it so quickly, my son? Well, he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and he said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Then, just to reassure himself for the last time, Isaac asked for one final confirmation. Said he, Art thou my very son Esau? And with complete finality, Jacob replied, So Isaac ate heartily of the savory meat which Jacob had presented to him. When the meal was finished, the elderly Isaac prepared to give him his son the coveted blessing. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him. During this embrace, Isaac immediately caught the perfumed fragrance of the goodly raiment Jacob was wearing, clothes which belonged to Esau's rich wardrobe. It apparently reminded the aged Isaac of the blossoms of the field, which his blind eyes would never see again. Therefore he began his blessing in these words, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren. You see, this is the top blessing. Can't do any better than this one. And let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. And so he departed. And then you have that tragic scene when Esau comes in and says, Here I am, father. And Isaac says, Who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, the Bible said, and asked, Who? Then where is he that hath taken venison and brought it to me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed. Now those are the words that endorse the blessing. So you can't get a priesthood blessing by deception. I kind of have a feeling that if we knew all of the facts, we'd know that Isaac kind of knew that he was supposed to be blessing Jacob with the first blessing. And now that he realizes that it was obtained by a deception, he endorses it and ratifies it. Otherwise, it never would have gone through to Jacob, because you can't get a blessing of the priesthood. It isn't sealed up on the other side. And unless it's sealed by the Spirit of promise, as an honest blessing, nothing actually happens. Well, when Esau found out what had happened, he said, Well, can't you give me some kind of a blessing, Father? Isn't there anything left over? And so the father blessed him to the little bit that he could. Well, there wasn't much left, actually. But he gave him whatever blessing he could. And Esau went out, but he was very angry. And he said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'll cut him down. I'll wait till my father's been buried, and then I'm going to kill him. And so Rebekah heard that too. She had the sharpest ears. She just must... I've noticed the women of the Middle East are very adept at this. They're here and there and everywhere, very busy, not paying any attention, but their ears just twittering with anxiety. Well, what's going on? Well, then she has this very interesting approach to Father Isaac. How can she get him to send this boy away? She used the one device that went right through to his heart like a shaft. And that was to complain to him that since Esau had married outside the covenant, her life would be worthless, and the covenant that had been given by Father Abraham down through the lineage lost if by any chance Jacob married outside the covenant. Oh, yes, Isaac said, that's right, we got to get this boy, got to get him out of here. So he says, thou shalt take thee a wife of the. Thou shalt not take thee a wife of the daughters of Canaan, Jacob. Arise, go to Pandan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessings of Abraham, to thee and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. So that's everything. Jacob is totally reconciled. Isaac is totally reconciled now to Jacob getting the whole blessing. And so he departs immediately, and his mother bade him farewell, saying that he would only be gone a few days, and then he could come back. How long before he came back? Nearly half a century. Will she ever see him again? No. She'll be dead before he gets back. Now, there's an answer to that one, and what is the answer? Right. Just as soon as Jacob was gone, this is one of the interesting things about this story. As soon as Esau realized how upset and uptight his mother and father were about marriage, he decided he'd better get with it too. So he went to his father's brother. Jacob had gone to his mother's brother. He went to his father's brother, who was Ishmael, and married into that family. And the Arabs descend from that marriage. Now we're together. Okay? Good question. And it's kind of exciting what the answer to that one is. That's it. There have been several times down through the centuries where Jerusalem and Israel has been the dominant people, and the Bedouin people have been all around, you see, rather dependent commercially and otherwise on the government. And then the Jews have been out of dominion, and the Arabs have taken it over. This has been the case from time to time. Now, in the latter days, Isaiah said that the two will live very closely together, and the Arabs will say to the Jews, God is with you, let us go with you and be together. It also says the Jews will be a great blessing to the Arabs and to other nations round about. So that reconciliation will come in due time. Not at the moment, however. Not at the moment. Now, when Jacob departed, he had quite a ways to go to get up to Luz, the city of light, which was quite a famous spot in Israel's history because it's where Abraham had offered sacrifices. And it was outside of this city that he went to sleep that night and had this wonderful vision in which, did he get to see God? Did he get to see the Lord in this vision, this dream? Yes or no? No? Yes. No. That's on the examination. So notice that he does get to see him at the top of the staircase. And he sees the angels going up and down, doesn't he? And then he receives that. He saw the personage of the Lord standing at the portals of glory, who spoke to him and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's the great blessing of Abraham, now given to Jacob, who must have wondered at times, though his father had blessed him and apparently forgiven him, had the Lord forgiven him? And apparently it's acceptable. Now the Lord says, Behold, Jacob, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. So that was a great blessing to him, and he's so glad now he's going to be blessed on this mission. It's dangerous in a sense. He's going to be able to get a lovely wife like his father obtained from this land. And so he goes forth rejoicing. Before he does so, he takes the stone on which he had rested during the night and heaved it up onto end so that it formed a pillar, and then poured oil on it and anointed it and made a covenant with God that whatsoever he should bless him with in Pandaram, he would give 1/10 to the Lord. This is the law of tithing. Let me ask you a question. Is tithing done away with under the law of consecration? Supposing we're all living united order of the law of consecration, where we gave all our surplus, all our increase to the Lord. After we take out what we need for our family, we give the increase to the Lord. Is tithing still used? Let me just tell you a little secret on that one, because I learned this myself not too long ago. Under the law of consecration or united order, if you only have enough for your family, supposing you're a school teacher, and actually when you got through there was no, after you'd taken care of your family and those needs, there really wasn't any surplus. So do you give anything? You pay a tithe, just like you do now. In other words, everybody pays in something, and if you don't have an increase, then you pay a tithe on that which you kept back for your family. So the tithing operates even under, and that's the way it is in the Doctrine and Covenants, and it sort of bothered me, so I got to doing some research on it and found that those who do not have anything to contribute as increase or surplus over the needs of their family then pay a tithe on what they did receive, just like you do now. It's the Doctrine and Covenants has it under tithing, where it says, "And this shall be a covenant forever," in the church. Right. So what you do is to have tithing as the floor. Everybody pays tithing. Then when you get into the law of consecration, you give all your increase or surplus over and above your needs. So actually what law of consecration is tithing plus. So you've stated it the way I generally understood it. But when I got to doing research on it, I found that under the law of consecration, there will be some people, you see, who will have only their necessities of life. They don't get past the necessities. The Lord says, then you just pay a tenth of that. Isn't that kind of interesting? Like we do now. Right? Okay? Who's going to receive the tithe? All right, good question, because apparently he has to sort of lay up in store until he comes to someone where there's an organized part of the kingdom for it. So we don't have that detail. We did with Abraham, but now we don't have it here, because you'd have to have a community life set up in order to make that contribution to a bishop, wouldn't you? Okay, good. Now, when Jacob arrived in Haran, I want to just point something out to you. When Abraham first went up to Haran, his father went with him, and then his father stayed there. After Abraham had continued on down into Egypt and come back here at the age of 75, we find that his brother Nahor and Milcah had come on up there and established themselves. And then Aram, a grandson of Nahor and Milcah, became very famous in this area, and it became known as Pandan Aram, the land of Pandan Aram. In other words, it was named after this grandchild of the first settlers. And that language and his prominence became so famous that it spread out in every direction, and they had kind of a dialect of the old Hebrew, and it became known as the language of Aram, or the Aramaic language. And when Jesus was on the earth, it was the dialect of Aram that everybody was speaking. It became as universal as Greek itself. And so you hear of the Aramaic language. Only Hebrew was used in the temple. But for the common speech of the people, they used the dialect of Hebrew called the Aramaic language, and that's what it comes from, Pandan Aram. And this territory and this culture subsequently spread all over Syria, all up and down into this territory. All right, now when he gets up there, this lovely girl, Rachel, probably about 14, this is an assumption on our part, because we think that's why he said, I'll work for her 7 years, meaning give her time to mature, grow up. We can't think of any other reason why he would specifically offer 7 years. We think that it was because she was young, maturing, but beautiful, and this is a thought. In any event, he saw her, and he introduced himself to her. She ran and told her brother Laban, and her father Laban, I should say. And then we find Jacob welcomed into the house. Now, he was a good guest. He made his bed like good missionaries do and tidied up around the house afterwards. And then he went out and helped with the flocks. And after about a month, why, Laban says, this just isn't right. You're a relative, but I don't want to impose on you. I'd like to pay you if I could. I'd like to keep you with me. And, well, Jacob said, I'm not going anywhere especially. And so he said, I tell you what I'll do. I'll work 7 years for the hand of your daughter Rachel. Did Laban think that was a good bargain? Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. This was a bargain. And so we have this. And did the time hang on the hands of Jacob? Did it seem like a long time? No, love does that to a person, they tell me. And I know it flies fast. And when a person is doing something for someone they love, it just seems like it goes fast. So it says the 7 years passed rapidly. Now you've got him up to around 64 years of age. And in our day, 64, is rather mature, to say the least. But because they live to be 175 or 180, you see, this makes 64 comparable to around 40, 45, maybe in the late 30s even. So he's a fine, handsome young fellow and mature, and sometimes more mature men are very attractive to girls, they say. So in any event, came time for the wedding. Now, was it a quiet, private wedding? No, it was a big affair, wasn't it? It was really a big affair. And I've watched some of the Bedouin weddings just to kind of get the spirit of the desert. And I'll tell you, they really put on a show. And they bring in everybody, and they're all in their real fancy robes and gowns, and there is much wining and dining and toast making and great laughter, and it's tremendous. And so in the very late hours, with nothing but very dim lights, if any at all, left, why, we have Jacob, of course, retiring to the honeymoon tent and to his bride. And that's quite a dramatic story, to say the least. For come morning, apparently there wasn't even enough conversation between the two of them to reveal the fact that this maiden that has been given in marriage, and there was a marriage ceremony, but she was heavily veiled, after the Middle East. This isn't the girl he's worked for. And it's kind of interesting when he wakes up the next morning and finds out who is there. It is not Rachel. And he was married to the one that is there, and that is Leah, and he just wasn't interested in Leah at all. She with the soft eyes, whatever that means, tender-eyed Leah. So I should imagine tender-eyed would be very appealing, but we don't know exactly what tender-eyed meant. But in any event, whatever it meant, it wasn't appealing to Jacob. Boy, was he raving mad when he got in there with the old sheik. What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? But the shrewd old sheik of Haran was ready with an answer. Said he, "Oh, it must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." Then he made a proposition to the wrath-filled bridegroom. Laban said that if Jacob would go ahead and fulfill the customary honeymoon or marriage week with Leah, he would then give Jacob the bride he had been expecting. Of course, the wily Laban added that if Jacob now took Rachel as a wife, it would cost him another 7 years. Boy, they're real bargainers. If you want to see something very interesting, you ought to go to Beirut, where the Jewish merchants bargain with the Lebanese, who are Arabs. And they just have an understanding with each other. It just isn't a good day if you haven't had a real good bargaining. They don't even like you to buy on the first offer, That takes all the fun out of it. You're supposed to haggle a little bit, back and forth. And it's almost like a drama to watch them. He'll say, how much? And of course, you can't understand their language. At least I couldn't, but I can tell about what they're. How much? Give you a good price. Israel. Best price, very best price. Take it or leave it. And he gives him a price. Oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. Wouldn't think of it. Goodbye. But he doesn't go very far. What was the price again? Well, the fellow says, you're such an... I'll come down below cost. And probably says, I'm losing money, but on every sale, but I make it up on volume. Well... And then I've watched them. There's this constant, no, it's no good. And then they just kind of walk a little slower as they get to the door. And there's always a meeting again. This will go on for an hour or an hour and a half. And you would think they were angry at each other. They call each other cheaters and so forth. They just really get themselves worked up. And finally, one of them will say, "It's all right. I shouldn't do it. My wife will be angry with me, but I'll let you have it. You're an old customer and a good friend. I'll let you have it. Oh, I'll never live this down, but you can have it." So the man finally pulls out the money and he says, "Sold." And immediately the other one lights up. "That's good." And he puts his arm around him and they have a little drink together and they wrap it up. It's really an interesting show. So if you ever go to Beirut, don't miss that. You go down to the marketplace and you watch the Jewish merchants bargain with the Lebanese merchants. Some of our most successful businessmen in New York are Lebanese. They're very successful and very good to deal with.
Do we have any indication or even...
The only thing we have is the statement by the brethren that whenever the priesthood has been on the earth and the priesthood participated in marriages, it has always been for time and eternity. It's the only kind of marriages the priesthood performs as such. So we would assume that that was the case. But it doesn't discuss it, so it's an assumption on our part. Now, after he had married these two girls, by the way, this is sometimes on my examinations, how long did Jacob have to wait before he got Rachel? 1 week. You think you remember that? Because nearly every student of the Old Testament, I've seen men with divinity degrees miss on that question. They just somehow get the little thought in the brain that he had to wait a total of 14 years after he met Rachel before he got her. No, he got her 1 week after Leah. And who was his favorite? And was that rather apparent from the beginning? Yeah, it was hard for Jacob to forgive Leah with the tender eyes for taking him in that way and conspiring with her daddy to get inside the marriage covenant by slickerino methods. But this kind of runs in the family. Little slickerinos going on all around here, it would seem. There are a lot of little slickerinos before we get through here. But in any event, it's interesting who had the first child? And so she gave him the name of Reuben, which means see, a son. Very good. She then conceived again and brought forth a son whom she named Simeon, and that means hearing. I think my husband now will, the Lord is hearing me and giving me the blessings to kind of make it up for me, and I think I'll get the confidence of my husband here in due time. And then finally she had another son, and she named him Levi, which means joined. Everything's getting better and better. And then the fourth son was born, and she felt like that was a real victory, and so she named him Judah, which means praised. Now, at this point, we have Rachel deciding that she just better have a son by proxy. She just isn't having children. Just isn't happening. She's just like Rebekah, not having children, so she decides that her maidservant will be given to her husband to bear children. Now, this was done in ancient times because a man paid a terrific dowry for his wife, on the assumption that if he abandoned her and she went back to her folks, that would be to kind of take care of her the rest of her life. That's what the dowry was for. Now, the husband who pays this tremendous dowry for this wife as an insurance policy that he's going to be true to her, etc., expects that she shall be able to bear him children. Otherwise, it was not a good bargain. Got to have children. And so in ancient times, it became customary to have a very beautiful handmaiden go with the bride as her handmaiden, but to be available in case her mistress was unable to bear children. And so you have Rachel asking Jacob to take her handmaiden for wife. What was her name? Bilhah. And so was she taken as a wife or a concubine? Wife. Now, we have some references. I think it was in this class. Someone was showing me some references in the Old Testament, and it is not changed in the inspired version, so we don't know whether it's right or wrong, referring to some of the patriarchs having concubines. But this probably needs to be clarified because, as Jacob says in the Book of Mormon, that under the priesthood there are no concubines. They are, if they're plural families, they are all wives, and they're to be treated equally. They receive their inheritances equally, which concubines did not. There doesn't seem to be a place for concubines under the true order of the priesthood at all. So she was married as a wife, and then she had a son, and all Rachel was so pleased. She says, "There, we're coming on now." And so, for some reason or another, Leah isn't able to have children, so she gets excited and asks Jacob if he'll please take her handmaid to wife. And what was her name? Zilpah. Can you remember those two women? They're famous women, so we don't have enough women's name in the Bible anyway, and so let's remember these few that we do have. And so she had a son, and Leah now, you see, this is a 5-1. She's doing pretty good. 5-1. So she named the first one Gad, which meant what? A troop cometh. We're on our way. We're going to gain. This is really an interesting competition. And then we have Bilhah having another son, and so it goes on. And before we're through, we have Leah with having her 6 sons. She had 6 sons altogether. We have Bilhah with 2 sons and Zilpah with 2 sons, and then finally Rachel has her little boy, and he was our great ancestor, born when the father was 91 years of age, and Joseph, born in his father's old age, was a son of great promise. And in fact, by the time Rachel had born a son, Jacob was ready to leave, go back home. Now, it would appear, and all Bible scholars generally have agreed, that he'd only been there for 20 years. Is this long enough to account for what happened? Doesn't fit, does it? So I followed Dr. Clark in his deduction and shared it within your book to show how, in all probability, the period was not 20. That was the time he was actually in the employment of Father Laban, but that actually he was down there around 40 years, about 40 years. He could not possibly have had grown sons who in just a few months are going to go in and wipe out the whole town where Dinah is going to be kidnapped and ravished. It just doesn't fit, you see, unless we have a considerable period of time. It's interesting that Jacob had such great success with the flocks of Laban that Laban did not want Jacob to leave, and makes him this proposition that if he will stay, he can have much better wages. He apparently has been a lousy boss. If everything is true that Jacob said was true, why Laban was really a hard man to work for. But now we find Jacob making a proposition that he'll get all the speckled cattle for his blessing, his reward. And of course, Laban just thought that was tremendous because there weren't very many of them. Yeah, you can pick them out. There wasn't even a tithing out there. If you've been around cattle very much, you'll notice that very seldom that you'll have these spotted cattle. And then Jacob thought he knew a little device to change that, so he get a lot of speckled cattle. And so he went through this device, which is a very old superstition, that whatever anything bearing its young sees will affect the offspring. Was this the real reason that Laban's cattle began to bear speckled cattle? He wouldn't have known this if the Lord hadn't revealed it, but the Lord did reveal it. And by what means was it achieved? Divine intervention in the genetic process. Right. Okay, now we have the return home, and we'll start there next time.